Hello, everyone. This is really very exciting. And well, my name is Martin, and I'm the author, as you probably all know, of the latest book, Sex, Purpose, Love. And while I was writing the book over the last 4 years, I was really looking forward to this moment of having a webinar and starting a community of people who share my passion and my purpose about healthy love relationship and making the world a better place. Today's theme is why relationships matter. So this is sort of like the overall image I want to use. This is where we want to get at the end of this whole series, which might go on for a year or longer, is that we have an integral relationship with a shared purpose, which is built on intimacy on the left, passion on the right, and commitment on the bottom. And down the road, we will get more how this triangle of love is constructed. And then in an ideal way, we not only love our partner, but we also love what is co-created between the two of us at the level of all 7 chakras. So this is the overall goal, aim, message, purpose of our web jam. And if you raised kids, or if you manage people, or if you read books, you may have seen this before, that when we want to achieve something or change something or create a certain behavior or whatever, it's often good to look at 4 factors. Is why to do something, and then get to the person want to do it once they understand why it is important, why to do it, and then have an understanding of what to do, and then how to do. So these are 4 basic things, and we're going to start out today, obviously, with the why to do, and we might have a second and even a third jam about why relationships matter. And as I said in the email, most people are familiar with the statistics about the benefits, the many benefits that people enjoy who are in relationships. And of course, it's somewhat of a question, and maybe you can chime on that, is, are healthy people more able to be in relationships, or do relationships make people more healthy? So what is the cause and the effect? But there is so much scientific research that people who are in relationship live up to 7 years longer. They're physically healthier, they're psychologically healthier, they enjoy a more satisfying sex life, they are wealthier, they have more income. And I also just read that they have more of an opportunity to become who they really want to become. So and there are many other obvious results, or not so obvious results, of relationships that are positive, that I said, if we could have something like that in a pill, that would sell in the billions, if we could have all these benefits of relationship in a pill. But obviously that is a personal choice that people can make, to die sooner and to not enjoy all the benefits of a relationship, and to be single. Or at the very least, they may say, well, I want to be in a relationship, but they're not making really an effort to be in a relationship. So recently I asked some relationship coaches and expert in a web group that I'm a part of, what is this definition of single by choice? Because many people feel, they're single, but they would love to be in a relationship. Are they still choosing to be single? And one person said, well, you're single by choice if you're not open to a relationship and you're not looking for a relationship, but you're not single by choice when you're online and you're actively working on yourself, maybe reading the book Calling in the One, or other books, How to Attract a Partner, or if you do prepare yourself and do all the work to be in a relationship. So that's that. But since I heard in about 2001, when I separated from my second wife and entered the dating scene in Northern California, it was the first time I learned about people who said, oh, I don't want to be in a relationship. I enjoy to be single, and maybe there is even something pathological to the idea of wanting to be in a relationship, because they felt that these people in that scene, in that New Age scene, felt that the purpose of life and the goal of life is to become whole and complete in yourself and not to need anyone. And that was a bitter pill for me to accept and to swallow at a time, because to me, growing up in Germany in that healthy family, I just felt everybody wanted to be in a relationship. And so that was kind of like a strange idea to me. And since then I have thought, what other arguments could there be for being in a relationship? And so I, over all these years thinking about it, I came to this additional understanding that I want to share with you. And this is a little technical, so bear with me. And we're going to be through that hopefully fairly quickly. So in integral theory, as you may know, there is this idea of that all reality is created of so-called holons. Holons are parts that are whole in themselves, but also part of something bigger. So a holon, we say, is always partial, already complete. And if you look at the bottom of that slide, you see atoms. And obviously atoms are co-created by subatomic particles that are whole and complete in themselves. At least we believe that. And then we have whole and complete atoms that come together. And since we talk about love, you can say they love, they resonate. Certain atoms resonate with each other. They love each other, and they co-create, very simply put, molecules. And these molecules have totally different properties than the atoms have. So something new, something novel emerges out of the combination of atoms, they forming molecules. And now we're kind of going along the line of let's say, a human being. The molecules, or any living being, the molecules, again, come together, co-create, love each other, and create cells. Of course, there's many steps in between. So, and then the cells, they come together and co-create tissue. The tissue come together and co-create organs, and your organs create you as a human being. And I find the thought also quite interesting. If I feel into my body, that's always how I start my meditation, to deeply feel into my body and relax my body and notice every part of my body, that my body works really without me doing any conscious effort, right? When we sleep, we survive. Our body just has this deep will to survive, and hopefully for every one of you functions quite well. So I find it significant if just this notice that we have this will to live, and that we only live because there's all these parts in our body, from atoms to organs, or even subatomic particles that co-create our aliveness, our being, that you are right here listening and looking at the screen. And then, so we call that an individual holon. Everything in that, below that line, we call individual holons. And in a moment, we get to what that means. And then there are some people that continue that hierarchy and say there is also what we call social holons. So humans, as you can see right below the line, individual humans, most of us have a certain drive, mainly through our sex drive, which is the drive to co-create and to procreate, to form couples. And then these couples, when they have children, they form families. And then multiple families together co-create communities. Communities create society. And then at the top, we have humanity. So I go to the next slide. So here to note, at the bottom, things are very small, and then they get larger and larger as we go up in that hierarchy. And that continues, two individuals, a couple is larger than two individuals, and a family is physically larger than two individuals, and so on and so forth. And if you would take all humanity together, that would be the largest form of all humans together. And so in somewhat of an ideal world, we have this what's called span That's just how many are there at each level. And obviously there is more atoms than molecules, and more cells than tissue, and so on and so forth. And then at the top of the first pyramid, there is one human that is created with all these parts. And then, couples, family, it continues that way, so to one humanity at the top. So that's the span. And so what we can say is about individual holons at the bottom is that each lower level is absolutely instrumental and fundamental to the higher level. So if we would take all cells away in your body, then there would be no more tissue, no more organs, and no more use. There would just be cells, and so on and so forth. And with every level, the value or the depth increases. In other words, an organ has much more value and depth than a few atoms or a few cells. We can probably get rid of a few cells in the body, but we cannot get rid of vital organs. So in integral theory, the higher we get in this holarchy, the more value is assigned. Now, if you look at social holons, each lower level is relatively instrumental and fundamental to the higher levels, with their decreasing intrinsic significant value or depth. And the levels are interdependent. So what that means is that we can have a community without families. So single people can get together and create communities. And the same is true for societies. They can, in theory, exist without communities. The other significant thing about, or difference about social holons and individual holons is that in individual holons, the parts usually cannot easily or not at all leave the holonic structure. So your liver cannot decide one day, oh, I no longer want to be in Steve's or Gudrun's or Ferdinand's body and leave. While in social holons, they're members. So people in social holons or groups, they can join and leave. So they're much more unstable, these social holons, than individual holons are. And that is quite significant if we come to the next slide. There's one more slide, just some text. Integral theory therefore maintains that social holons decrease in depth or value with their size because they don't create new unique properties. So we could argue about that on the couple level, and we will in a second. But just a bunch of people together don't create a new unique property as a bunch of cells or cell tissue coming together and creating an organ. Second is they don't increase in complexity. Again, we may want to argue about that, but this is what integral theory maintains. And also, social holons, if they get bigger, they don't increase in consciousness. Again, some people may argue that and say human consciousness is bigger than individual humans, their consciousness. And four, they are not co-created or emerge in the same way as individual holons do. So that is all described in more detail in my new book, Sex, Purpose, Love. And by the way, at the end, I will provide you a link where you can download that PowerPoint presentation. So if we assign the greatest depth to the individual human being, as we see here, which humanity has done probably starting with Descartes, with the Enlightenment, where we had this switch from that humans felt that they're a product of God and had all kinds of belief of who we are. When Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, or consciousness, therefore being. And since then, we have kind of like put the individual human into the center, assigning the greatest depth. And as we said, the ideal span would look like this, but in modern and postmodern societies, just go back so you can see this, right, from before. In modern and postmodern societies, and assigning the highest depth to the individual, we see obviously fewer and fewer couples. And with fewer couples, or couples who don't have children, we see fewer nuclear families with a father and a mother and children, which also creates fewer stable communities. Of course, there are still communities, but if they're composed of singles, they're relatively unstable, because singles, they tend to move in and out or isolate themselves and just don't connect with other people in the way that families who have children. I have 4 daughters, and so I just know how that was when we met other parents in kindergarten and in groups, where the children connect, and there was just like a different connection with other people than when I became single. And so we see this change from a span like this, what I call ideal span, to a span like this. And again, that's because one main reason is because we give the greatest step to the individual human and not the couple. And Professor Fellman is probably still online. He wrote this excellent book, The Couple, that deeply, deeply impacted and influenced me. There's also an English version now where he really makes this anthropological argument. Professor Fellman, is an anthropological philosopher, why the couple has primacy over the individual. We will get to that in another webjam. So anyway, if we move back to assigning the greatest depth to the couple, and that's the basic argument that I'm making, what we have to move towards, to the co-creative couple, then we have the chance to come back to this ideal image of holonic structure of size, as you see on the left, ideal span in the middle, and depth, assigning the depth to the couple. So what I hear you say is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in the integral community, you notice that there are more men than women.
Yes. Most of the women who are around are more green and sort of teal turquoise, in my experience.
Mm-hmm. So they're more green and they tend to turquoise?
And I said there are more than teal or turquoise.
I see. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That is. So we're assuming now that most people who are on this call understand, what we talk about when we go into the colors of integral theory, and we will get there in one of the future jam sessions for the people who are new. But for now, we just assume that people know what we're talking about, and. So in my observation, just very generally speaking, and touring around the world and doing workshops and things like that thankfully there is usually more men interested even in the integral relationship workshops than women, even though sometimes it's balanced, or we also sometimes had more women. And when I wrote integral relationships and shared that with women, they often felt that it's a very heady concept, right? It's like, as somebody said, it's like a lollipop, a big head and a small stick. It's not very embodied, which is, of course, it's a model, right? It's a map. It's the menu in a restaurant. So we cannot confuse that with the actual meal. But then women often told me, wow, you're an interesting guy. And, but I don't feel a heart connection with you. That's why I ended up writing it as a manual for men. And so, but integral gatherings obviously, often attract people who are not at the integral level of consciousness. And yes, I also observed that often women who come to integral gatherings are, more in the green stage. And of course, that's an ongoing discussion. How would we get more people to the integral level? And one of my theories is if only men feel really attracted to the integral level, or if mostly men feel attracted to the integral level, and women are not, then by my theory, right, of co-creation between males and females, of cultural evolution, if there is not an equal amount of women, then we're creating somewhat of a roadblock. But there is some some additional insight around that I learned from Jenny Wade, who wrote the book Changes of Mind. And she observed that a lot of women tend to skip the orange stage, which is the rational stage. So they tend to go from mythic to pluralistic to green, and then have little to no integration in orange. That's of course not all women, but some women. So of course that is not ideal, because then that creates a shadow or a hole in their development. But there is a lot of green women who never really integrated the orange stage really fully, while men usually go more fully through the orange stage. And I met a lot of integral men who in a way skipped the green stage. They can conceptualize it theoretically, but they haven't been in all the green tantra groups and love and nonviolent communication and whatever, lived in a community and in an intentional community and all the things that happen in the green stage. So they jump from orange to integral. And what I see now is that there is a potential for green women more or less jumping the integral conceptual stage and jumping into turquoise. And so what that means is that men who feel they're in the integral stage right now, and specifically those who have not really integrated or embodied the green stage, that they can advance into the turquoise stage, which very simply put, I may say, is an embodied integral, what the integral life practice is, for example. And in a way reintegrate parts of green that they have not integrated yet. That's why when I go out there and do workshops, there is only a relatively short presentation Friday evening, and then the weekend we're practicing, where there's no teaching, we're only doing exercises. And some people may have been in one of my workshops. And I often see how on Friday evenings, the men are all like, yeah, this is great, theory, and they discuss and they get the whole theory. And then we go into the weekend workshop, with a lot of hugging and eye gazing and touching and opening up and doing inner work. And often these men then really struggle in the exercises, where the women who may on Friday evening went like, wow, this is just like all way too theoretical. And I'm afraid now that this will the whole be weekend. They go like, wow, this is great now, the weekend, because they have more capacity to embody it. So what I see is that a turquoise stage is where relationships can between males and females can happen again, when women are ready to exit the green stage. So exit green, from my opinion, opens the possibility for them more or less skipping the integral stage and meeting a man in the turquoise stage, which then of course means the man has to be in the turquoise stage as well. So that would be my 11 cents on that topic. So in other words, it's futile to wait for more women grow into the integral stage, but what we men can do is to embody green really and move on to turquoise. Think about healthy green. I think about my experience in HAI workshops, that's the Human Awareness Institute, or HAI.org, or in Tantra workshops, or in nonviolent communication groups where we were really practicing embodied work and not endless discussions about some environmental issues or green issues. So I'm very anti-stereotyping and saying, women are like that and men are like that. I mean, that's pretty much what my first book is about, to show, integral relationships that, people develop and go through different phases. And, but Jenny Wade is a woman, and that was an observation that she made. And once I read that, and we do an exercise in the integral relationship workshop where autobiographically people, look back at their life and in all four quadrants and look how they went through the different stages. And very often people have ahas where they deeply resonate, let's say, with the mythic or the rational stage or the egocentric, and not so deeply resonate with other stages. And they go like, wow, yeah, I didn't really, embody that stage as deeply as my partner in the diet where we do the exercise with it. And then they realize in their now life how sometimes they fall in a way in into that hole, right, of not having developed one of the earlier stages. And I think there is a tendency, as somebody already commented in spiral dynamics, of the cold and the warm colors, that men seem to have a tendency to embody certain stages more deeply, spending more time there, creating more span in that particular stage, or more integration in that particular stage than women do, and vice versa. Right. So there's this difference between integration and transformation, where we say we grow vertically in one stage by integrating more and more aspects of that particular stage, let's say of the mythic stage or the rational stage. And then once we have exhausted the tools that are available at that level, and if they're no longer sufficient to address the problems that we're facing, then we transform to the next higher stage. So that drives integral people crazy if people offer like a transformative weekend workshop and then say that on that weekend you're gonna transform to the next higher level, while what they really are doing is just providing more tools at that particular level, right? So it's more integration, and they call that integration transformation, but just as a little side note. And so anyway, that's what my new book, Sex, Purpose, Love, the philosophy or the message is, one of the big messages is that, women probably can skip the integral stage, just as some men skip the green stage. And then there is sort of like a new level of relating possible at the turquoise stage, where men in the relationship can learn to embody more of their green, of the green stage, of the healthy green, not the endless debating and all the pathologies of green, but the healthy aspects of green. And women can integrate more of the integral part that they then learn or practice with the male partner. Because otherwise we're just getting stuck, and as we will see in one of the next jams, people not procreating as much as these higher stages. We're just seeing more or less a collapse back to the orange and the mythic stage. And at least in the US and in other countries, we see these increasing fights between orange and mythic, because there's just not enough people in higher stages. So Carol made a good point here. She wrote, to my delusional and limited point of view, this is not unifying men and women right now, what we're saying. And because we're male-splaining right now, in a way. We're speaking from an orange and from an integral level right now. Right?
Never, not that.
Yeah. And that is, of course, I'm very sensitive to that. But and of course, I'm getting defensive now immediately by saying, yes, that's why we see so many problems in relationships, from my point of view, in the green and at the integral level, and specifically, so like this male frustration that there aren't more integral women, and the women frustration that that integral men are often doing what we're doing right now, theorizing about these things. And we tend to bring that into our relationships then by explaining to the women in the relationship how they should behave, in a way, from an integral perspective, how they should feel and think and see the world. And that is exactly that turnoff that then leads to comments like that, right? Where then women feel put off and say, where is your heart? Where are your feelings, your emotions? And then the integral man, of course, goes, well, that's all green stuff, right? I just worked very hard to exit green, so I don't want to go back there. And then that exactly creates that divide. Understanding that, right? That's why I wrote this additional book, which is in a way almost a critique of my first book, because the first book is really this, coming very much from that integral level, and I felt we need to take that to a next level, to which is built around shared purpose, which we will talk about in one of the following jams, which really becomes then sort of like the clue to bring males and females together again, hopefully at the turquoise level, around their shared purpose. And of course, at a turquoise level, I really feel where we go out of the theory and out of our heads again and back into our hearts and specifically around our purpose. So it's different than green, where it's all about emoting and being in the body and connected with earth and things. So that becomes a part, but what emerges is really this deep passion, for what I call creating a better world, serving the world in a way, and realizing that it is done much more effectively in a relation. There's a longing in you to be in a relationship and to practice the things in a relationship that and also the things that you can only develop and practice in a relationship, right? There's only so much you can do on your own. And then
very much, yes.
I assume you're single, I'm single. So
you assume correctly.
Where I want to go with this and what I try to say, and of course I say that in theory, because we can practice is that that as somebody said, we need to integrate head and heart. And if we very stereotypically say that on green we have a focus on heart and on integral we have a focus on head again, right? Then by logic, by nature, at least in my mind, the next higher level is where we really integrate head and heart. And what I invite all men is to feel into how can we advance to turquoise without feeling we're sliding back to green. And specifically, if we have not really integrated green as much as possible, then we actually have to go back to green and do more work there so we can meet women at the turquoise level where also the male-female stereotypes can hopefully dissolve more. And as somebody said, we can focus more on masculine and feminine polarities, which can be embodied ideally by males and females in similar ways. And we get away from the gender stereotypes. I want to just answer Sarah's question. Martin, could you elaborate on why you think it is important to be in relationship in order to grow spiritual? So that is a great question, and we will make probably another whole session around that. But in short, I'm going to say that when we're in relationship, we make fairly sure that we avoid what's called spiritual bypassing. If we want to go away from the world and not deal with anything that has to do with the body and the world, and our emotions and shadow and all these things, and also live, in a world where we're listening to what emerges inside of us, or even, go into this space of no thought, then of course we don't need a partner. But as Ken said many years ago, spiritual practice, we would want to see qualities in people who are spiritual or have a spiritual practice duplicated in as many other people as possible. And so just pursuing a spiritual practice on our own is, of course, something that we wouldn't want to see in a majority of all humanity. But the spiritual bypassing part is the main part, because the shadow usually only comes up in relationship, and integrity, which we will also talk in one of our next jams, which is around doing what we say and not only saying what we do. In other words, not just saying I'm a loving person, I'm a compassionate person, I'm a caring person, but to really show that we can live that in a relationship is where the proof is in the pudding, as Adyashanti said. The depth and embodiment of our spiritual realization will be seen in our relationships. That's where the proof is in the pudding. And spiritual people have a lot of problems in their relationships. Thank you all for participating and commenting, and have a great weekend, and thanks for your support. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, everyone.